The silk binding your wrists is expensive. Not rope, silk, because silk doesn't leave marks, and marks lower value. You're kneeling on limestone in a chamber that smells like rosewater and something metallic underneath it. The floor gleams, not from water. 3 doors stand before you. Behind one, women weeping. Rhythmic, almost like chanting. Behind the second, nothing. Silence so complete it feels like being buried alive. Behind the third, laughter, the soft sound of wine being poured, men discussing poetry in a language you barely recognize. Before we go deeper into this moment, I'd love to know where you're watching from. It's incredible how a story buried in medieval documents can reach from Cairo to California, from the past straight into your screen today. Her name was Catherine, 23 years old, daughter of a French merchant who believed contracts could stop armies. 3 months ago, she watched him die clutching papers with official seals, promises written in Arabic and Latin that dissolved the moment Mamluk soldiers poured through the gates of Acre in 1260. Those documents, negotiated carefully over years, stamped with the Sultan's approval, became worthless in the span of a single afternoon. Catherine screamed her mother's name until her voice gave out. Different hands pulled them in different directions. She never saw her mother again, never learned if she survived the first hour. Now Catherine waits in this underground chamber with 17 other women, all Christian, all captured during the final campaigns that erased the Crusader kingdoms from the map. They're waiting for a man named Emir Tashimor to decide their futures. His official title translates to something bureaucratic: Integration Specialist. That word appears in the records constantly. Integration. It sounds almost humane, like helping refugees adjust to a new society. What it actually meant was something the modern world struggles to articulate, even now, even with the documents laid out in archive boxes in Damascus and Cairo, because the Mamluks had discovered something during their own enslavement that most conquerors never grasp. Human beings are malleable. Given the right combination of time, isolation, and total environmental control, you can systematically erase one identity and build another in its place. They knew this worked because it had been done to them. Every sultan, every commander, every official who shaped the medieval Islamic world had started as a slave. Boys purchased from Turkic tribes in Central Asia, from Circassian communities in the Caucasus, taken as children and converted to Islam with ruthless precision. Trained in warfare, administration, languages, law. By their 20s, these former slaves commanded armies. By their 30s, some ruled kingdoms. In 1250, when the Ayyubid dynasty collapsed, it was a Mamluk, a former slave, who seized the Egyptian throne. This created a paradox at the heart of their civilization. The ruling class consisted entirely of men who'd been systematically transformed through bondage. But they didn't view this as tragedy. They viewed it as proven methodology. If boys could be converted into elite warriors, then any captured population could be converted into whatever the state required. Soldiers, artisans, administrators, laborers, and women who could perform functions that free women of equivalent status would not. So they built infrastructure, 7 major processing facilities in Damascus alone, standardized procedures, medical examination within 24 hours, classification based on age, origin, physical condition, assessed capability. Every individual tracked through the system. Mortality rates calculated. Productivity measured. The Mamluks approached human acquisition with the same systematic thinking they applied to military logistics and tax collection. Tashimor enters the chamber carrying no weapons. His robe is simple but spotless. Guards defer to him with the careful respect reserved for those who wield administrative rather than physical power. He begins walking down the line of kneeling women, asking questions in different languages: Arabic, Armenian, Greek, French. His voice stays calm, clinical. He's not choosing slaves. He's sorting inventory. Age matters. Origin matters. Physical condition matters most. But there's something else he evaluates, something harder to name. He asks each woman a question in her native language, and the question varies, but the underlying test remains constant. He's measuring their capacity for transformation. A younger girl, maybe 16, Armenian features, terrified eyes. He speaks to her in Armenian. She doesn't understand the question at first. He repeats it. Her face drains. She shakes her head violently. He nods to a guard. The girl is led toward the left door. Door 1. It opens briefly. Through it, Catherine glimpses sunlight, a courtyard, dozens of women sitting in rows while men in official robes examine them with the practiced efficiency of livestock merchants evaluating breeding stock. The door closes. Tashimor continues. His selections follow patterns that become clearer with each choice. Then he stops in front of Catherine. His eyes are neither kind nor cruel, just calculating. He asks his question in Frankish French, and his accent is perfect. This detail matters. The Mamluks didn't merely conquer, they studied. They learned the languages of their enemies. They understood Christian social structures well enough to exploit them systematically. Can you read? Catherine hesitates. In that moment, she makes a calculation that will determine everything. She could lie, claim ignorance, hope that illiteracy might lead to assignment somewhere less terrible than whatever awaits educated captives. But something in Tashimor's expression suggests he already knows the answer. Her father was a merchant. Merchants taught their children to read, contracts, correspondence, account books. Lying would only prove she lacked judgment. Yes, French and Latin, some Arabic. Tashimor's expression doesn't change, but something shifts. He gestures to a guard who brings a wooden tablet covered in wax. On it, someone has written a line in Arabic script, formal, classical, a verse from religious poetry. Read this. Catherine studies it, reads it aloud. Her pronunciation is uncertain but comprehensible. Tashimor makes a mark on the parchment he carries, then moves to the next woman without another word. Catherine doesn't know it yet, but she's just been selected for door 3. Not the courtyard where basic domestic servants are sorted, not the center door leading to immediate sale in the slave markets. Door 3 leads somewhere that requires education, linguistic ability, skills that make women suitable for what the records call administrative household placement. This sounds almost merciful, like clerical work, correspondence, record-keeping, managing account books, and it is those things. But the administrative household track serves multiple functions, calculated with the same precision the Mamluks apply to grain storage and military supply chains. 3 days after the selection, Catherine is taken through door 3 into a smaller chamber, its walls covered with carpets that muffle sound. 5 other women wait there, all selected by the same criteria: educated, multilingual, young enough to be reshaped. An older woman enters. Her name is Sophia. 20 years earlier, she had stood exactly where Catherine now stands, captured during a raid on Armenian territory, processed through this same system. She survived, and now she trains others to survive. What Sophia teaches over the next 60 days is systematic erasure paired with systematic reconstruction. Week 1 focuses on language, not learning Arabic, but forgetting how to speak in ways that signal Christian identity. Certain phrases must be eliminated. References to Christian prayer, appeals to saints, even casual invocations that Christians use without thinking. God willing is acceptable. Christ preserve us is not. Sophia listens to their conversations with each other, correcting constantly until the linguistic markers of their former faith vanish from their speech. Week 2 addresses body memory. Christian women carry themselves differently than Muslim women of equivalent social status. The differences are subtle but visible to trained observers. Posture, gesture, the way you lower your eyes or fail to. They practice for hours daily, walking, sitting, standing, responding to commands. The repetition is deliberate. The body must forget its previous patterns before new ones can take root. Week 3 teaches household management. Not cooking or cleaning, tasks that lower-status captives learn. Administrative placement means managing other servants, maintaining account books, handling correspondence for women of the household who might not be literate themselves. Catherine's ability to read and write becomes her primary function. She learns the specific formats used in Mamluk administrative documents, the proper forms of address, the hierarchies governing every interaction. Week 4 brings the most difficult lessons. These are transformations that cannot be practiced, only explained. Sophia speaks with clinical precision about what will be expected in the household where Catherine will eventually be placed, the nature of access that male household members will have, the responses that are required, the absolute necessity of compliance presented not as moral instruction, but as survival strategy. Resistance is waste, Sophia explains, her voice empty of emotion. The household has invested in your acquisition and training. Resistance damages that investment. Damaged investments are discarded. Catherine had seen the markets during her first week in Damascus, a brief excursion that served as object lesson more than orientation, the lower-tier markets where damaged goods were sold at deep discount. Women whose resistance had marked them as untrainable. Women whose physical damage made them unsuitable for anything except the hardest labor. Women who would be worked until they died, a process that typically took between 2 and 5 years according to mortality calculations that administrators tracked with the same precision they tracked grain harvests. The message was clear: submit to transformation or be destroyed. On the 61st day, Catherine was assigned to the household of a mid-level administrative official named Khalil ibn Musa. He managed tax collection for 3 districts outside Damascus. His household included his wife, 2 concubines, 4 children, and now Catherine, whose official designation translated roughly to literate attendant. Her primary duties involved correspondence. Khalil's wife, Amina, could not read or write, not unusual for women of her generation and class. Catherine became her voice in written form, drafting letters to relatives, maintaining household accounts, recording inventories of goods and property. During the day, Catherine sat in the women's quarters with a writing desk, producing the documents that kept the household functioning. Twice weekly, after evening prayers, she was summoned to Khalil's private chamber to provide what the system had calculated she would provide. Not recorded in official documents, not discussed openly, but understood by everyone involved as part of the arrangement that made administrative household placement function as intended. The system had designed this with remarkable precision. By making Catherine useful during the day, essential even for household operations, it created incentive for decent treatment. Damaged goods couldn't perform administrative duties effectively. At the same time, by ensuring she remained property rather than family, it maintained boundaries that prevented complications. She was valuable but replaceable, necessary but never secure. Catherine lived in this state of controlled usefulness for 12 years. 12 years of careful compliance, 12 years of speaking in ways that left no trace of her former identity. 12 years of managing correspondence for a household that treated her sometimes kindly, sometimes indifferently, always as property whose value lay in her continued functionality. The records show that during this period, Catherine drafted over 4,000 documents: letters, contracts, account ledgers, inventories. Her handwriting appears in archives across Damascus, evidence of a life spent making other people's words visible while her own remained unspoken. But in the spring of 1272, something changed. Sultan Baybars, the Mamluk ruler who had crushed the remaining Crusader states and established unchallenged dominance across the region, held a public audience in Damascus. These events served multiple purposes: displays of power, opportunities for subjects to petition for justice, demonstrations that the Sultan remained accessible despite his authority. Catherine attended because Khalil's wife was presenting a petition regarding property taxes, and Catherine needed to be present to read documents if questions arose. She stood in the women's section, veiled, silent, surrounded by dozens of other women whose presence served similar bureaucratic functions. Then something happened that the chroniclers struggled to explain with precision. A minor official several places ahead in the petition line made an error, some confusion about boundaries in a property dispute. The Sultan's secretary requested clarification, asking if anyone present could read the relevant survey documents from the previous decade. Catherine stepped forward, not called, not summoned. She simply moved from her position, walked to the secretary, and indicated she could read the documents in question. In the silence that followed, she did something unprecedented. She spoke directly to the Sultan without being addressed first, a breach of protocol that could warrant immediate punishment. "I can read this," she said in Arabic, "and I can tell you it's wrong." The hall went silent. The Sultan himself looked at her, not at Khalil, not at the official who owned her, at Catherine directly. "How do you know it's wrong?" "Because I drafted the original document 10 years ago. The boundary markers are misrecorded here. What happened next appears in 3 separate chronicle accounts, each slightly different but agreeing on the essential facts." The Sultan questioned her. She answered with precision, citing specific details from memory. The document was retrieved. She was correct. The Sultan then asked the question that should never have been asked of someone in her position. "Why did you speak?" Catherine's answer appears in one chronicle in full. "Because the error would have caused injustice, and I have lived 12 years in a system that functions through precision. If precision fails, the entire structure fails." This statement did something unexpected. It acknowledged the system that enslaved her while simultaneously asserting her own value within it. It demonstrated complete understanding of Mamluk administrative philosophy, the idea that systematic precision creates stability, while implicitly claiming she had become essential to that precision. The Sultan studied her for a long moment. Then he did something that shocked everyone present. He asked Khalil ibn Musa how much Catherine was worth. Khalil, caught completely unprepared, named a figure, high, because Catherine's skills made her genuinely valuable. Baybars paid it, immediately, from the royal treasury. And then he did something even more remarkable. He freed her. Not granted her to another household, not reassigned her, freed her completely with documentation in front of witnesses whose testimony would make the manumission legally unbreakable. The chroniclers debate why. Some suggest the Sultan was impressed by her precision. Others claim he was making a point about meritocracy in Mamluk society, that even slaves could demonstrate value worth recognizing. Still, others believe he was simply in a generous mood, and Catherine's timing was extraordinary luck. But there's another possibility the documents hint at. Perhaps the Sultan recognized something of himself in Catherine's situation. A person reshaped by systematic bondage, trained to function within a structure not of their choosing, who nonetheless found ways to become indispensable rather than disposable. Catherine lived another 31 years. The records show she worked as a scribe in Damascus, drafting documents for various households and officials, compensated now as a free contractor rather than owned property. She never married, never had children, never returned to Christian territories, though the roots existed and former captives sometimes managed the journey. In 1303, near the end of her life, she dictated a document to another scribe. Her own handwriting had become too unsteady. It's preserved in a Damascus archive, a single page of parchment containing something historians call Catherine's Testament, though it's not quite a will and not quite a memoir. In it, she describes the 3 doors, what lay behind each one. She names the women who went through door 1, sorted into military households as basic servants. She describes door 2, the center door leading to immediate market sale, where women became property of merchants, laborers, whoever could afford the lowest tier pricing. And she explains door 3, the path she survived, where education became both salvation and trap. valuable enough to preserve, never secure enough to relax. She writes about the silk bindings that didn't leave marks, about the systematic erasure of language, gesture, identity, about learning to speak in ways that left no trace of who she'd been, about 12 years of careful usefulness leading to one moment of unexpected speech. And then she writes something that appears nowhere else in medieval chronicles of this period. They did not break us with cruelty. They broke us with systems. And the systems worked because they convinced us that survival required cooperation with our own erasure. The document ends there. No moral lesson. No call for vengeance or plea for justice. Just the plain statement of how it functioned, recorded with the same precision she'd learned during 60 days in a chamber with carpeted walls. When modern historians examine the Mamluk system of captive integration, they focus on military slavery. The boys taken and transformed into warriors. Catherine's story appears in footnotes, if at all, a minor administrative case. One woman among thousands processed through facilities designed for systematic transformation. But her testament survives, and it describes something that remains difficult to name even now, a form of control that worked not through violence but through making survival contingent on voluntary participation in one's own conversion, where resistance meant death, but compliance meant becoming someone else entirely, where the cruelest option wasn't the door with screams. It was the door that taught you to forget there had ever been other doors at all. Catherine remembered. She recorded. And centuries later, her words remain in a Damascus archive, describing in careful script exactly how systematic transformation feels from the inside. Not like breaking, but like learning to speak a new language until your mother tongue becomes a memory so distant you're not sure it was ever real.